Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for coming back. It's been a wonderful time speaking to everyone that has helped make this show.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Dave, and it's good to be back.
Right. So you joined us at the start of this series. We've now reached the end. What was the greatest story that you've told that we've encountered over the last 4 billion years? You got to pick one.
That is such a difficult question. I suppose the story that I enjoyed most on Life on Our Planet, which I think I mentioned when I was on in episode 1, strangely, is Lystrosaurus. Because Lystrosaurus really represents the series in miniature. We meet him in episode 3, where scootosaurs kind of bark at him and he runs into his burrow. We then see him again later when the Permian extinction has happened, and he kind of walks forlornly into the distance with the whole future of life hanging on his shoulders. And then we see him in episode 4 inherit the earth and come to survive and to thrive until he unwittingly becomes the dodo of his age and gets hunted to extinction by giant reptiles. But what I love about that sort of story arc is that is the series in miniature, from underdog to top dog, only to then actually get your comeuppance in the end anyway. So I will always have a soft spot for Lystrosaurus, probably also because he was actually the very first VFX scene that we did. First scene that we filmed, first scene that we designed, first scene that got sent to Spielberg for approval, which was exciting and terrifying at the same time. So yeah, he is my weird favorite.
So what have we, the audience, learned from the last 8 episodes?
Well, I hope people have learned a few things. Firstly, that the story of life is incredible. The highs and lows, the chaos, the craziness that happens through it, the fact that we are all related to this single cell from 4 billion years ago. But I also hope the audience have learnt the fragility, I suppose, of life on our planet. One of the things that surprised me most when we were putting the show together is that Earth isn't the stage that this happens on, but an active player in it. And that's never been more important than what we see happening right now, where we are heading into the 6th mass extinction, where we, human beings, are changing the fabric of our planet. And so I really hope that Loop almost shines a different lens onto climate change and the 6th mass extinction, that hopefully will maybe be a call to action for people to really sit up and think, we don't want 96% of life to go extinct like what happened in the Permian. The fact that that is beginning to be mirrored right now, I hope we might inspire the audience to say enough is enough.
And will that be the desired legacy of the show, action and understanding?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope on that kind of big scale that's what it brings. It brings this level of understanding and hopefully a rallying cry to people. I think on a slightly different level that is maybe slightly less philosophical, I hope from a television point of view, it motivates people within the genre to tell really strong stories. Because I think, as I may have mentioned when we talked for the beginning of this series, Life on Our Planet's greatest asset is neither its brilliant natural history, nor its amazing VFX, nor Spielberg, nor Morgan Freeman, but it's its story. That its story is such a page turner. And in some ways, I hope that the industry of documentary, particularly in the natural history space, might take some motivation from that too.
Yeah, I was just thinking from, like a scientific public awareness kind of science communication point of view. But of course, yeah, there is the impact that it will have on natural history documentary making and on Netflix and all of that to think about as well. So the scope of it is a lot bigger than I remember. I keep on being surprised by how big and influential something like this could be.
I really hope so. And actually, I've got another thing to add to it, Dave. What do I hope the audience takes away? That prehistory is not just dinosaurs. There is so much more to it than dinosaurs. And we had a review prior to the series launching that said it's a shame that the dinosaurs don't appear until the very end of episode 4, although they are in episode 1, of course. And I thought that review was really misjudged in a way, because one of the things I found most interesting about the series was how life well before the dinosaurs was so kind of untapped in the world of filmmaking. Whole eras of life that just seem to be ignored. And so that's another thing I hope from a sort of almost scientific point of view. I hope it might inspire the next generation of paleontologists, and maybe they'll be motivated to focus on eras other than the Jurassic and Cretaceous.
And again, as I was saying, the scope of it, even something for me as a paleontologist to say and to highlight, yes, it's not just about dinosaurs. That kind of feels like it's like a given in this series.
Yeah.
But yeah, like how many other shows do that? So looking at other shows, Prehistoric Planet came out just, what was it, a year or something before this one?
Yeah.
When did you become aware of that? How long were you both working on your projects? And was it a bit of a kick in the teeth to see them beat you to...
I wouldn't have said it was a kick in the teeth. No, I'm a great believer in the fact that the more material there is within a certain subject, the better. It shows an appetite in the audience. So we first became aware of Prehistoric Planet, I think, at the beginning or maybe the middle of 2019. So we'd been making the show for about a year by that point, when we first heard about them crewing up. And yes, as you said, they kind of beat us to the punch by about a year, which I think was because there weren't quite as many episodes in their first season as there were on Life on Our Planet. So I think they could probably therefore make it a little bit quicker. But of course, also their series focused on the dinosaurs at one moment in time, 66 million years ago. And as a result, they had the luxury of not needing to know about the entire history of life from 4 billion years ago to the present and even into the future. So I would say that the R&D phase for what we needed to do was just significantly different.
So speaking about research, there are things that are going to be raised, inaccuracies or half-truths or something like that people might highlight. And certainly me watching it and being involved in it, there's things in there that I would say like, but I wish it would have been shown this way or that way, or simply like, oh, that isn't right, that little bit of anatomy that I've spotted. Okay, so how are you going to deal with those? Is it inevitable that you're going to get things wrong?
Oh, it's inevitable. And I'll use T-Rex as an example. That literally, it would be impossible to make a T-Rex in terms of its appearance and behavior that the paleontological world would agree on. Because take feathers, for example, that some people think it was completely feathered. Some people think it had no feathers at all. And so where do you go when we're trying to design our T-Rex? How do we make a T-Rex that will sort of appeal to the masses? And it's very, very difficult. Ultimately, what we tried to do is if the spectrum of controversy is a bell-shaped curve, right, where you've got kind of extreme opinions at one end, other extreme opinions at the other, but the majority is here in the middle, we always tried to walk that path of what the majority thought. But because of that, the people at either end will definitely say that we got it wrong. But I kind of came to the conclusion early on that it is literally impossible to make the series in a way where there is 100% agreement in the scientific world, because there isn't 100% agreement in the scientific world. So it was always a case of trying to navigate the path where we were on the least thin ice.
And I see paleontological documentaries as snapshots of the science, at that time and place.
Yeah.
But if there wasn't any controversy, the science would be complete, I think.
Oh, yes, that is true. But that's another good point, Dave, is how future-proof is the show? And again, the answer to that is, well, it depends. But we based the series on the scientific data we had available between 2018 and 2023. But undoubtedly, over the course of the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years, I don't know how long the show will stay evergreen, but if you use Walking with Dinosaurs as an example, that was still rating really well on Netflix 20 years after it was made. So if I look back on Loop in 20 years' time, of course there's going to be scientific progress made. And it might be that we know something slightly different about the asteroid or the behavior of certain creatures or the anatomy of them because of new discoveries. So that's always going to happen. And look, I embrace that. I think if the series in any way inspires people to get to the bottom of a certain issue, fantastic.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I want this series to be outdated as soon as possible, because as soon as it's outdated, it means that the science has progressed. It means that we know more. This is just a snapshot of knowledge. And if we can improve upon that, if we can build upon that, then it's all the better. And then the next documentary is going to reflect that and be awesome.
I mean, in some ways, the series obviously shares DNA with Attenborough's Life on Earth, his kind of tour de force from 1979. And that's a really good example that was scientifically accurate in 1979. But when you rewatch that now, there's huge swathes of information that we now understand differently. As an example, I think back then, no one knew what caused the dinosaur extinction. The asteroid theory hadn't yet been proposed. So there's always going to be things that develop from here on in. And yeah, as said, I embrace that.
Yeah, and when you think about how many people got inspired by Attenborough, inspired by Walking with Dinosaurs, and they're going to be inspired by Life on Our Planet as well, hopefully. Yeah,
I agree.
What are you most pleased with this series?
That is a good question. I suppose what I'm most pleased with, forgetting about what the audience might take home from it and all the rest of it, what I'm most pleased with, as strange as it sounds, is that we pulled it off. I've worked in telly for over 25 years, and this project was hard. We had a massive subject, the 4 billion year story of life on Earth. And we had to film that in a way that combined natural history with VFX, something that no one's ever really done before, to create a serialized story that would, be a wild ride to watch, but also be scientifically accurate and kind of inspirational, hopefully, to a new generation of people who get to see this. So I'm, as strange as it sounds, I'm most pleased that we did it, that we embraced the pain of how difficult this was and the logistical challenges, and somehow managed to pull it together.
Are you worried that that effort won't get recognized?
Oh, not really. I'm not someone who wants recognition from peers or awards or anything like that.
Okay, not personally, but for your staff, for the series, for the people that made this, that people will just see the documentary, go, "Oh, that T-Rex's leg doesn't look right," and chuck it.
Well, I don't think that's likely. Now, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I think we can be proud of it, whatever people were to say for it. And in a weird way, Dave, one of the when I'm running shows, I bring along with me a lot of these silly mantras of ways that we're going to try and make the show. And one of them is we're making it for the 99%. And what I mean by that is that we should always be focusing on who our targeted audience is going to be, and try and make the decisions for those people. And so the 1% of people might be, for instance, the people who've got a 8K 20-foot wide screen at home. And we've made some decisions on some of our drone use, for instance, that we weren't going to shoot 8K. And that is a decision that is a really good example of the 99%. Similarly, there are some decisions where, paleontologists might look at, as you say, the leg of a T-Rex and be disappointed in it. But, I would hope in that example that 99% of T-Rex specialists wouldn't be disappointed. But accepting that there is always going to be a minority of people who find something that didn't quite work for them, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay, thinking back now to my time working on Loop, I have taken a lot away from it. I have learned a lot to think about those 99%, to think about what is possible, the constraints of documentary making, the necessities, the balance between scientific accuracy and feasibility of creating scenes. There is so much that you don't see in the final thing that is going on in the background. I have taken away a lot from that. I have learned, I have changed my opinions. I have started to, as I was speaking to Sophie about earlier, I've started to accept that, behaviors might not necessarily be based in scientific literature, but you have to show some behavior. You have to show things, and that is important in terms of telling stories, in terms of showing animals as real organisms, in engaging audiences with something that they can latch onto. It's all really important. That has changed me. So how has Loop changed you?
Can I just, before I answer that, Dave, pick up on what you've said there? There's a lot of information out there, as you've already discussed through this series, about how we use 160 different scientific consultants, and how you, together with Tom Fletcher, wrote all these fact files, which I think across the series numbers something like 6,000 pages of information passed on to ILM about the assets. But I think it's important to stress what we at Silverback Films also brought to the table, And that is years and years of watching animals behave. And I think that is also a really key part of the series construction, that from our DOP, Jamie, through all of our producers, there is this understanding of animal behavior that we were able to impart on our subjects when we were designing scenes. And a really good example is about 10 years ago, there was a band of brothers of cheetah that suddenly started hunting ostriches. And this had never been seen before. And they were remarkably successful at it. But it only lasted for about 2 years before that band separated. I can't remember whether they were driven off their territory by lions or something. But anyway, for a 2-year period, these cheetah hunted ostriches. If in 100,000 years, paleontologists of the future were picking through fossil evidence of the Serengeti, maybe 1 million years actually, no one would ever say cheetahs hunted ostriches, because they'd look at the relative size difference, the relative speed, the teeth of the cheetah, the overlapping ranges of the two, the different prey that they could have eaten. And yet, for us, that happened. And so sometimes when we were designing scenes, we did use our experience. Well, while the science was always the tail that wagged the dog, certainly when it came to behavior, we had this unique skill set, which we also applied to the scenes. But onto your question, how has Luke changed me? I mean, my background, I don't know if you know this, Dave, is I did biology at Oxford. So I have a scientific background. I knew what the story of life was, obviously. But I certainly loved getting into the weeds on it, finding out more information about it than I'd ever known before. So it certainly turned me into much more of a paleo geek than I was before, which I love. Very recently, Tom Fletcher and I got a chance to look around. We got a kind of VIP tour of the La Brea tar pits in LA.
Oh, amazing.
And it was amazing. And I think maybe me in 2017 would have gone around that being mildly interested, but me in 2023 went around that like a kid in a candy store. So that has definitely changed me. I think also it has, you know, for my sort of career development, from my career development point of view, it's changed me in that I now understand the world of VFX. And when I started Loop, I had done a few VFX series, but nothing of this ilk at all. And to now be able to walk in that field is exciting.
Did you get a selfie in front of the dire wolf wall?
Well, actually, we got a behind the scenes tour. So one of the most exciting bits was going into, I think it was pit 32, where
you went into a pit.
Yeah, we were literally allowed down this ladder to the tar pits, and we were able to like take trowels in and start moving things around. It was, you know, as you know, it's a kind of working excavation site. So it had these big viewing windows, and all these kids were banging on the windows asking me to push Tom in, which was very, very amusing. But then when we went behind the scenes, their store is a little bit like that end scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you just open this door and as far as the eye can see, there are just walls and walls of boxes. You open a box and it is crammed full of Smilodon humerus. And then open the next one and it's got hundreds of ground sloth femurs in it. It was absolutely amazing.
each one of those boxes in museums around the world, in bigger collections around the world, each one of those is a story. Each one of those is a potential scene in an episode.
I agree.
And that for me
Yeah.
is what life on our planet is about, starting to tell some of those stories and showing people just how big the world of paleontology and life is.
Yeah. I mean, it was amazing as well, just seeing their they're now exploring what they call the matrix of all the little things that had previously been ignored because they're just a collection of bones surrounding 4 smilodon and a mammoth. And now they're beginning to investigate those. And we met a lovely paleontologist, Stephanie, who was painstakingly removing tar from a bone that I think was from a lizard. But again, it just made you realize what is out there. This massive kind of untapped resource of discoveries waiting to happen. And I suppose that's definitely changed me. To go back to the original question, to be able to really celebrate and get involved in that is, hugely exciting.
Yeah, just as an aside, I went to an SVP once, and I'm not a vertebrate guy. I hate going there. And so I managed to find someone that was working on arthropods, and they were doing meat-eating, bone boring bugs that were living on top of the animals as they died in the tar pits and got stuck. And you get all these bugs gnawing on them.
Yeah.
And they were looking at that. Oh, it's so much you can learn.
Yeah, amazing. There was something also just special about that place because it just still feels primeval. You know, this tar that is literally bubbling like treacle in front of you. It was amazing. It was like being next to a volcano or something. It felt genuinely prehistoric.
In the middle of Hollywood.
In the middle of Hollywood. It's so bizarre, yeah.
Yeah, people don't realize just, how close those things are.
Yeah.
So I've not actually spoken to Tom since you both went to LA. Did you push him in? Is he coming back? Or is the next Life on Our Planet going to examine the bones of Dr. Tom Fletcher?
He is coming back. He did make it back on the plane. Interestingly, on our last day, he went back to La Brea. But I think that was because when we were there on the Tuesday, we hadn't had a chance to go to the gift shop. So Tom, being Tom, I think went back and somehow managed to find an eccentric bit of merch, which is always something he's after.
So obviously, this documentary inside and out. You have seen every single scene hundreds of times. You know the script off by heart and could recite it. Have you ever sat and watched it yourself? And have you ever sat and watched it with anyone who hasn't seen it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Dave, I have definitely watched it hundreds and hundreds of times on a episode by episode, scene by scene, even shot by shot basis. But at the same time, I'll let you into a little bit of an insider exclusive, which is that we actually finished the series in about June this year. So that was when the last show had the last bit of bells and whistles put on and got sent to Netflix. And so because of that, there's been this quite nice time lag of not seeing it and not living and breathing it every day. So when it came out, I actually sat down and watched it with my family and loved it. Loved it for so many reasons. Firstly, I loved watching it with them because they gasped in the right places, they laughed in the right places, and really importantly, when it got to like 9:30 on Wednesday night, when we watched episodes 1 and 2, and it was a school night, So they were kind of looking at me like, can we watch enough? And everyone looks at each other, oh, go on, one more. And so it really had that kind of binge watch goal that we had been hoping for. So yeah, it was a real privilege actually to sit down and watch it kind of in private in this nice family atmosphere and realize that for me, at least, and for them, it worked. The blood, sweat, and tears that I and the entire team had put on seemed worth it at that point.
Oh, that must be so nice, so rewarding.
It was. Although I should say that, when we were making the show, it was covered in non-disclosure agreements. So, we weren't allowed to talk to anyone about it. But one of my kids, who is now 17, but when we started was 12, I did use him as sort of audience testing through the process. So, I would show him early storyboards when we weren't quite sure, should it end this way? Should it end this way? And that was really useful because I think he was definitely our target audience, kind of family with an interest in natural history, an interest in paleontology. So yeah, he was super useful. Just don't tell anyone.
Oh, but yeah, you think that it's a third of his life or something that this documentary's been in production.
I know. It is crazy. I mean, actually, the whole show has been so life-changing for people. I mean, I think we had all sorts of people on the team get married, get pets, buy their first homes, and of course have babies. If you watch to the very end of episode 8, you will find a production babies credit. And I think that by the time you include everyone, so Netflix, ILM, scientists, us, I think there are 22 babies. So
wow.
Yeah, there's a list of 22 babies. And then I love that after listing the 22, it then says in brackets, life finds a way. No one will ever notice it, but I love that little detail.
I'm going to have to stay all the way to the end then.
Yeah, exactly. I got asked the other day about Easter eggs, about special things that people may notice. That's sort of a weird one, but there's also ones sort of dotted throughout. I love the way that Big Ben, the clock is stopped at 1 minute to midnight. Yeah,
clever.
Yeah, thanks. There's also a few nods to Jurassic Park through the series. There's a nod to the movie Taken at one point. So
I missed that.
There are a few things that people may notice when they watch it. Maybe not the first time, but maybe the second or third. But it's worth it just for that.
Yeah, we were talking about the nerdy Easter eggs with Barney and talking a lot about Star Wars. And I love that kind of stuff that, gets you coming back, gets you to watch it a second time.
Well, we decided to give that a go, partly because of Stranger Things, right? So when Stranger Things Series 1 came out, I missed it. I didn't hear about it on Netflix. I didn't see the publicity or anything like that. But the first I heard about it was when people started talking about the Easter eggs. And there was a video on YouTube that had like a side-by-side of, look, here's this scene in Stranger Things, and here's this scene from E.T. And all of these sorts of 80s references. And so Barney and I, at an early point of the show's development, thought, well, hang on, if it's working for them, let's try it in this. And we didn't end up going the whole hog. A lot of the ideas hit the cutting room floor, but there are still a handful for people to spot. And I bet what happens, Dave, is that people will find ones we didn't deliberately put in.
Right.
I'm sure that there'll be things, oh, look, they did that from Alien. And we'll be like, well, we'll take it.
I wonder if any scenes from Life on Our Planet will be recreated elsewhere.
That would be nice if it's the gift that keeps on giving. And we see those little memes pop up. That would be quite funny.
Right. So bringing this to an end now. Do you have any thoughts about the series as a whole?
Well, that's a big question, Dave. Look, we've talked a lot already about sort of my hopes for what the series can achieve, certainly in terms of inspiring people to make the decision to protect our planet and our role in it. But I think on top of that, there are lots of sort of other things I hope the series achieves. I mean, I really hope it motivates the next generation of paleontologists, kids who are watching who want to know more about the environment and the prehistory. I hope that it gets people wanting to explore our world right now, to a certain extent, before it's too late. All sorts of things. I suppose from a professional point of view, the other thing I slightly hope it does is I hope it shakes up the natural history industry a bit. That I think the genre would benefit so much from the power of storytelling. And I think that's what we've been able to do on Life on Our Planet. You know, we've had the greatest story of all, the story of life, to be able to tell. But I think in telling that, we've found a way to tell it in a style that is dramatic and funny and harrowing at times. And if that can be a shot in the arm for the industry, the genre of natural history as a whole, I think that can also only be a good thing.
All right, Dan. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show, for your contributions to this podcast, and for making this whole podcast series possible. I've loved it. I have learned so much. I have almost cried at times. I've been laughing at other things. Watching the show, doing the podcast, all of the extra insights that we've got, I have loved every moment of that. So thank you so much.
Well, Dave, it's been a pleasure. So I hope it goes well.